Before I begin this series, I just want to be clear that the research process and production standards were handled with the same dedication and attention to detail as my previous videos. By no means did my personal opinions on the album make me cut corners or put less hours into this. Physical Graffiti is a double album, so double the effort it was. I thank you beforehand. Now on to the show.
And that was the last good record I made, Physical Graffiti, really. So everything in between has been okay. That's a sweeping statement, but it's what I believe.
So like with all the other latter-day Led Zeppelin albums I've talked about on my channel, I will go to latter days as the starting point for this story. The year was 2002. Past the first 4 albums, this compilation was an extension to safely dive into the second half of their career. I was at my childhood friend's house when I played the album on his CD player. First 2 songs had me on the edge of my seat with its progressive rock vibes. Next was Houses of the Holy, and I had no idea there was a Zeppelin album by the same name. Robert's vocals sounded playful, with a very catchy pop song, disguised as rock and roll. I tried to guess the time period for this one by going over the booklet. My guess was somewhere between 1972 and 1973. This track reminded me of the theme song for That 70s Show. I pictured myself dancing with Donna to its guitar crunch ballroom blitz. Trample Underfoot was next, and I enjoyed its mighty funk power. Robert's vocals sounded different, but the instrumental behind it was infectious. I checked the booklet again, and thought this had to be 1975. Kashmir was next, and as I mentioned on my worst performing video on this channel, I looked at my friend like, dude, this is the song from Godzilla. Check out that episode for more details on this historic moment. I absolutely loved Kashmir. Yeah. 10 Years Gone had some of the inspiration from the third album, next to the raw guitar sound and room-style drum punch of the previous 2 numbers. I really liked the opening vibes and solo, but I felt it was a bit repetitive towards the end without the excitement of Trample Underfoot, nor the progressive style of Kashmir. I eventually got my copy of Houses, only to realize Houses of the Holy was not in there. Now remember Mole San Pedro from my 1995 episode? Well, because Physical Graffiti was a double album, it was always an expensive CD at all 3 music stores there. Living on a rock and roll budget was hard. I had to prioritize other record acquisitions before spending my money on a gluttonous act like a double album. The day came when I finally got the courage and parental unit cash to purchase my first ever double album, Physical Graffiti. I got home and couldn't understand how the 2 CD jewel box worked. Ashamed of myself, I went back to the record store, where the salesman looked at me like kids these days, and gave me a 10-second tutorial on how to do it. Back home again, I looked at the 15-track list with caution. I was afraid of playing it out of insane expectations on the material and its ridiculous retail price at the time. Year after year, I became quite selective with graffiti and probably overplayed 10 Years Gone, past many girlfriend breakups and early 20s friend zone heartbreaks. I slowly realized my absolute favorite tunes were cut down to 8 numbers. Technically an album worth of material, leaving 7 tracks out of both cassette mixtapes and CDR compilations. Whenever I took graffiti on the road, it was always a struggle to switch between CD number 1 and number 2, revisiting my favorites. Rarely did I listen to the whole thing in one sitting, never mind Night Flight. Then this YouTube channel happened and I worked on Into the Outdoor, Houses of the Holy, and Presence, knowing graffiti was looking at me from a distance. Then I released my Earl's Court 1975 series in December 2023, and I thought, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. So here I am, with enough knowledge and understanding on the pre and post graffiti events to finally delve into a double album that holds a very complicated backstory hidden in the shining exterior walls of success. And it wasn't complicated because of accidents or tragedies, but passive tension building up in a newfound place for the band, finally taking the time to enjoy their fortune and riches from 5 years of very hard work. A physical manifestation occurred from the early scars of adulation to the prestigious traps of high roller excess. Why is this record loved so much? Is it Kashmir? Why 7 outtakes? Coda had 8. Maybe it's a storytelling piece of the travels and hassle inside the thrill-seeking music business. Maybe it's a cabin fever scream for help of Continental Hyatt desires and Drake Hotel mysteries. If Houses of the Holy is expansion, Presence premonition, maybe graffiti is a regression of the real 10 Years Gone, since 1965, when the world was young and the bandmates' paths converged in a single song. Or maybe it's just a 70s rock and roll instruction manual, where everyone can find a soundtrack number to their impulses. Let's go inside the Swan Song offices, inside the Zeppelin building, an album I have 5 copies of. This is the Making of Physical Graffiti. The double album story begins on Monday, July 30th, 1973, with the morning after charting Billboard's Hot 100 by the end of the week. The band wished there was a morning after, holding through the night, looking for the money that was stolen from the safe deposit box at the Drake Hotel on Sunday. They partied hard that night at the Carlisle Hotel near Central Park. It was the last show of a very successful tour, and they received gold records for Houses of the Holy that evening. Yeah, that's Jimmy Page wearing the Moon and Stars suit next to Benihana restaurant founder Roki Aoki at the Drake Hotel before leaving with John Paul Jones and Peter Grant to join Robert and Bonzo already at the party. No hangovers could stop a Zeppelin press conference held at the hotel telling the world about the safe deposit incident. In the bandmates' dark rooms, lyrics for the morning after teased them tired rock stars. We had a chance to find the sunshine. Let's keep on looking for the light. Newspaper headlines talked about the airplane disaster at Boston, killing 83 passengers, and the Watergate scandal heating up in the Senate. The music business in July saw Queen, Barry Manilow, and 10cc's debut albums, short-haired Carlos Santana dressed in white, Genesis' first live album, ZZ Top's Hard Blues Rocking Grooves, Funkadelic's sensational Cosmic Stop, Grand Funk's We're an American Band, becoming their second best-selling studio record, and The Sweets' Blockbuster, making its US debut on the charts. All 4 Led Zeppelin members were interviewed about the robbery by NYPD detectives on July 31st. They all said they didn't have any knowledge on how their touring money was handled besides selling out all 34 American dates. Robert Plant probably told the policeman that he was still a golden god. Bonzo laughed out loud and sang the chorus for the Beatles' Golden Slumbers. Jones laughed in silence. James Patrick Page was still recovering from not sleeping for 5 days. The morning after was back on the radio. The lyrics were prophetic for the band. We're moving closer to the shore. I know we'll be there by tomorrow, and we'll escape the darkness. We won't be searching anymore. The band left the United States on August 1st, back home to Britannia, the English motherland. As the plane took off from New York, Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly with His Song came on the speakers of the airport. Memories of their 9th visit to America were now part of a rock and roll dream that couldn't do no wrong. Stories for generations to come, and the question remained, how could they top themselves? Where would they go from here? Robert Plant headed out to Morocco for a long overdue vacation and soon to be a Zeppelin tradition. August 1973 continued the fabulous list of album releases, with Inner Visions featuring Stevie Wonder playing all instruments for his hit single Higher Ground, Marvin Gaye's career-defining Let's Get It On, Leonard Skinner's multi-layered guitar debut influenced a million bands later, perfecting the game of their electric forefathers. With Freebird becoming a 70s anthem, it was clear the rock and roll game had strong newcomers. The Rolling Stones released their heavily underrated 13th studio album in America. Goat Head Soup lives in the shadow of their previous double vinyl set to this day. Hit single Angie gave them a nice financial return for their efforts, just in time for their European tour. NBC News aired a special report on August 31st, shot back in July on the Starship, en route to Led Zeppelin's shows at Madison Square Garden. Sources state Page and Bonham were dancing here to the sound of I Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside. A Mickey Mouse produced hit by the name of Brother Louie topped the charts. Written by Hot Chocolate and covered by American band Stories that same year, its sound seems to have influenced Led Zeppelin. More on this later on. Last but not least, American Graffiti scored $115 million at the box office, making it the third most successful movie of 1973. Its retro rock and doo-wop soundtrack outsold Yes songs, Quadrophenia, and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. It certainly left a lasting impression on the word graffiti in show business. Atlantic Records released a strange singles combo of Jamaica and The Crunch on September 17, 1973, in order to get these reggae and funk numbers to compete in a very diverse musical landscape that year. Robert Plant attended the Melody Maker Awards ceremony on September 29th, winning for Best Male Singer on the international section of the poll, which also had Led Zeppelin at number 5 for Best Group, John Bonham at number 3 for Drummers, John Paul Jones at number 5 for Bass Players, Jimmy Page at number 5 for Guitarists, Houses of the Holy at the bottom of the list for albums, beaten by very good competitors including Birds of Fire and Santana's Caravanserai. Jimmy got the third spot for Best Producer and Composer with Robert Plant. Brightest Hope Award went to Beck, Bogert, and Appice. Talk about wishful thinking, right? Best Live Act went to Alice Cooper with Led Zeppelin at number 4. Arranger Award had Roy Wood, Jimmy Page, and Frank Zappa, tied in at number 5. Let's take a look at the other categories for 1973. On the UK side of things, you had David Bowie as Best Male Singer, Led Zeppelin at number 5 for Best Group, and number 7 for Best Album, beating Made in Japan. It was quite obvious why only Robert Plant showed up for this ceremony. Quite a miracle he did, really.
Good evening. The Middle East War produced developments all over the world today. The oil-producing countries of the Arab world decided to use their oil as a political weapon. They will reduce oil production by 5% a month until the Israelis withdraw from occupied territories.
Every day, refineries in the United States rely on 26 million gallons of crude oil from the Middle East to keep operating at full capacity. That is only 5 or 6% of our daily fuel needs, but if in the months to come the Arabs cut it off gradually, as they threaten, by next summer the shortage will be far more serious than it was this past summer.
Before we go into Led Zeppelin's recording process at the time, I want to discuss the musical setting of late 1972 all through 1973 from a production standpoint. Thanks to my dear patrons who fund my research, I managed to find 50 references that could have worked as inspiration for Physical Graffiti's color palette. I promise to share them later on this documentary. Because these guys didn't have portable playlists outside of cassette mixtapes and buying a lot of records on and off the road, the circumstantial factor cannot be ignored, as it plays a subconscious part in developing new compositions. 1972 brought a strong funk influence and orchestration, courtesy of The Temptations' Papa Was a Rolling Stone, Curtis Mayfield's Superfly, Stevie Wonder's Superstition with its signature clavinet sounds, and the OJ's Love Train with a leading wah-wah guitar. This style of music opened the doors for a mainstream funk appreciation in 1973. Now, from a sonic design perspective, check out the Doobie Brothers' Evil Woman from March 1973's The Captain and Me. The big room sounding drums signaled into Led Zeppelin's future. Sessions for Physical Graffiti began in October 1973 in a familiar setting for the band, the fourth album Shelter, a musical hiding place from the world, Headley Grange. British rock band Help Yourself lived there ever since Zeppelin's departure in 1971, working on their Beware the Shadow and Strange Affair albums. Certainly a place for rock and roll inspiration. Jimmy Page wanted to keep the strategy from their last two albums and make use of the countryside as instrument. The recording protocol remained the same, except Ronnie Lane's mobile unit coming in to capture the new songs. Acquired by the Face's own Ronnie Lane, the LMS, or Lane Mobile Studio, was built by engineer Ron Nevison, whose name will come up later in the Zeppelin story. The LMS was previously booked June through July 1973 for the Who's Quadrophenia. I know what you're thinking. Was the Rolling Stones mobile truck available? Well, it was booked for Deep Purple's November 1973 sessions for Burn, so we could say it wasn't available. Led Zeppelin's first session took place on October 17th with a loose jam of 50s covers to remove the rust from their vacations. This recording is rumored to exist. Next, they went into working out their own ideas. Let's take a look at all 8 songs brought to the table. John Paul Jones had 2 keyboard tunes, Trample Underfoot and In the Light, going for new sounds and vibrations. Jimmy Page was the predominant songwriter, with 6 guitar-dominated tracks, built around chords, as the natural progression from his work on Houses of the Holy. While these songs have riffs within, they were used as a secondary tool next to the protagonist's rhythm patterns. There's a conceptual sameness in these new tracks. For example, the open A chord for Custard Pie can be found in the middle section for Kashmir, while the chromatic descending riff of the Wonton song can be found in Custard Pie. Speed-wise, there is an overall style going for mid-tempo drum grooves, with the Wonton song somewhat fast. Physical Graffiti is mostly a Page and Bonham sonic wall of open chords and long middle tempo grooves, picking up right where When the Levee Breaks left. It was also the result of being tired from concert prime performance levels of touring both Europe and the States that year. Jimmy's virtuoso lead guitar was the culmination of a 5-year process. The new album had him looking for new trails, thus unlocking a signature musical style for the rest of his recording career: open chord crunch and expressionistic soloing. Graffiti is rhythm guitar paradise, an ambitious approach in tune with Led Zeppelin's business, changing course as well. Their record deal with Atlantic was to expire that same month. The band was inspired by the Beatles and Apple Records. They wanted to have their own label. Exhausted from touring and Led Zeppelin getting in the way of his precious family life, John Paul Jones talked to Peter Grant about his growing sentiments towards quitting the band in favor of new challenges. Contrary to what many fans believe, and what even Robert Plant himself has said about recording Graffiti without Jones, this is not entirely true. It was a complicated moment that only the best rock and roll manager could handle, and certainly speaks of the band's changing politics. It wasn't Bonham, nor Page, nor Plant who talked Jonesy out of quitting Led Zeppelin, but Peter Grant. And just for the record, Jones saying he wanted to take a job as an organist at London's Westminster Abbey was a joke in response to somebody asking him about his thoughts on Zeppelin at the time. Peter Grant was of course terrified at the idea of Jonesy leaving the group and suggested he take the rest of the year off to work on his projects and spend time with his family. The way Peter played this with everybody else was to say Jones was a bit tired and needed some time to rest. Now, I've read online forums discuss the what-if scenario of Jones quitting for good, and I don't really understand fans who even suggest the possibility of someone replacing Jonesy. Yes, there were many musicians at the time who would have loved to take this job, but plain and simple, John Paul Jones was irreplaceable as the secret weapon who made things work on stage, plus adding his unique, and let me underline this, unique musicianship in the studio. You need further proof of this? Go watch my post-Led Zeppelin 1990 series for the Page and Plan endeavors, including Walking into Clarksdale. These on Jones projects would have been so much better with him on board. The Jones factor managed to lock in with Bonzo, possess harmonic telepathy with Jimmy, and deal with Robert's tongue-in-cheek communication styles. It was not an easy job to be the glue that held the pieces together in the greatest band of the 70s. Now, if Jones would have left graffiti for good, that meant taking the serious funk of Trample Underfoot and the ethereal travels of In the Light with him. Oh sorry, I also forgot, the orchestral score for Kashmir, In My Time of Dying's superb bass work, Custard Pie's clavinet groove, the Wanton song's backbone. My point is, Led Zeppelin remained the sum of all parts, and their multi-instrumentalist silent partner was up there with British rock royalty, next to Chris Squire, John Entwistle, and Paul McCartney. Now, can we blame John Paul Jones' desire to leave Zeppelin by October 1973? Not really. They achieved success in every corner of the rock and roll game. 5 hot-selling records, 417 shows across North America, Europe, Japan, and Australia. The world at their feet with a stupendous collection of songs, forever cementing their legacy in popular music. Looking at Led Zeppelin's post-1973 stats all the way to 1980, we have 3 studio albums that became harder to make each time, 105 concerts with set lists featuring less than 40% of their latter-day material, excess taking a dangerous toll on the mental and physical health, and personal tragedy striking twice. Yes, the money was coming in and there were millionaires, but to a musician's musician like John Paul Jones, who remained the most consistent Zeppelin member on stage, artistic growth was a key motivator. So what did John Paul Jones do in his time away from physical graffiti? Let me tell you, he was busy. But no, he did not record a self-titled album you can get on Amazon for $35. Check out the comment section for this one, it's hilarious. John Paul Jones teamed up for a second time with American soul singer Madeline Bell. Jones co-wrote 2 songs from 1968's Doing Things and was back as producer for her third album, Coming At Ya. This 10-track album of jazz, funk, and soul excursions features Jones on keyboards, bass, electric guitar, backing vocals, and engineering duties. Coming At Ya included John Pierre Rowling Azule, who played guitar for Johnny Holiday from 1969 to 1977. Drumming duties were shared between Barry DeSouza and Tony Newman. Barry was a well-known session player, with credits such as 1972's Songfall by Philip Goodhand Tate, and featured James Bond work for 1977's The Spy Who Loved Me. Tony Newman played on Donovan's Baraba Jagal, where he met backing vocalist Madeline Bell. His resume at the time included laying his drumming skills on Jeff Beck's Beckola, Jackie Lomax's Is This What You Want, Driftwood and May Blitz's debut albums, Eddie Hardin's Home Is Where You Find It, John Baldry's Good to Be Alive, Alan Clark's Headroom, and yes, that album cover was designed by Hypnosis. Roger Cook's Minstrel in Flight, yep, another Hypnosis cover, and 1973's 3-Man Army with the great Paul Gervitz. Tony Newman would also go on to record David Bowie's Diamond Dogs, as well as Bowie's first live album. He also worked on David Coverdale's fantastic solo album, North Winds, and Whitesnake's first EP by the name of Snakebite. Okay, back to Madeline Bell's record. The lineup was completed with Jim Lawless on percussion and several backing vocal credits, including Jones's wife, Maureen. Orchestra conductor duties were performed by David Katz. The album was recorded at 2 locations, London's Morgan Studios, where a couple of songs from Led Zeppelin 2 were done, and John Paul Jones' home studio, aka Dormouse, in Sussex. So is Coming At You worth a listen? You're damn right it is. Madeline's voice is captivating, and you can also hear Jones's prominent bass work on the mix, as well as his other fine instrumental contributions. Madeline Bell and Jonesy would team up again some 11 years later for the Scream for Help sessions.
Aside from writing those other 2 songs, we wrote about 10 others, didn't we? Did we, boy? Seems like 100. Okay. We're going to try and get through this number. John's leading off the band, so take it away, JPJ. Living free, that's my calling. Being real, no time stalling. I'm coming at you. Tipping right up on you. Tipping right at you. There's no telling what I might do. Now I'll admit that I'm bad sometimes. And I do like saying what's on my mind.
Now Jonesy worked on a second project somewhere in November 1973, Joe Bryant's glam rock masterpiece, Creatures of the Street. Released in January 1974, this is one bizarre and exciting record of histrionic performances. Who's Joe Bryant, you ask? That was the stage name for American musician and actor Bruce Wayne Campbell. Born in Pennsylvania, he was a child prodigy on piano and organ, studying the works of Prokofiev, as well as writing his own classical-inspired compositions. Past high school, he embarked in the world of musical theater, landing the part of Neil Wolfe Donovan in the 1968 lineup of the controversial rock musical Hair. He was eventually fired for upstaging the rest of the cast. Joe Bryant recorded a debut album by the name of Pigeon, released through Decca in 1969. He then relocated to California. Joe Bryant lived a troubled life, hustling to survive. He was discovered by manager Jerry Brandt, who got him a $500,000 2-record deal with Elektra Records. In many ways, before Freddie Mercury's over-the-top attitude, there was Joe Bryant, who also rivaled David Bowie in the quest for Best Glam Rock Artist. His debut album was heavily promoted, gaining both good and bad press. His follow-up featured musical contributions by Peter Frampton and John Paul Jones, with Eddie Kramer himself as producer. Now, it's hard to determine Jones's exact contributions here, as there are other bass players on the album, like American jazz funk bassist Gordon Edwards, whose long and impressive list of credits include John Lennon's Mind Games. Drum legend Bernard Purdy also plays on the album. Joe Bryant Salisbury died of AIDS complications in 1983. Back at Headley Grange, the Page, Plant and Bonham camp was left to work as a trio. Based on Physical Graffiti's deluxe edition bonus material, such as an early version of Sick Again, dated October 25th, it seems initial recording sessions were held without Jones to lay down the basic tracks for several songs. We can only imagine what was going through their minds, knowing a new album was being made, without guarantees on their instrumentalists coming back. This explains the rhythm guitar dominance of Graffiti. It was really carved out as an instrumental duo, Page and Bonham. Sick Again was the second track worked out in October, with a main guitar riff inspired by 50s rockabilly, the Rolling Stones, and 1973 music offerings such as Fairport Convention's Nights on the Road and T-Rex's The Groover. Sick Again opens up with Jimmy's aggressive chords going into an A major and A minor variation. The main riff features an interesting time signature of 5/4, with Bonham's ride and hi-hat work, a descending E minor scale, and a 3-power chord response. Traces of these E minor notes can be found on Jimmy's violin bow solo from 1973. Next, there's a chorus section in A major, followed by a descending bass line of B, A flat, and F sharp over a guitar arpeggio in B major. If this sounds familiar, it's because it is. Page used a similar idea on 1969's What Is and What Should Never Be. Jimmy's blues-inspired solo is backed up by a captivating slide guitar that creates a sense of urgency, with Jones and Bonham's stellar rhythm work rivaling the spotlight. This is one of my favorite moments on the album. The song's guitar cut-off ending is similar to Untitled's When the Levee Breaks. Robert Plant's lyrics are a cinematic description of the lives and aspirations of LA groupies he saw on the band's most recent tour of America. While Led Zeppelin's friendship with them is well known in the rock and roll books, what Robert talks about here is a shift in the nature of such partnership, going from the love of music into blindfolded adulation. The best explanation for this can be found on the movie Almost Famous, when Penny Lane explains to William Miller that they are not groupies but band-aids who want to contribute to the creative process and take good care of the musicians. Sick Again was performed on the 1975 and 1977 tours, plus a last return in 1979 at one show in Copenhagen and both Knebworth dates. One of Led Zeppelin's signature songs and most innovative tracks from their catalog. Much has been discussed on what inspired Jimmy Page to write this hypnotic guitar part, and after much thought, I believe it came from one of the top 10 movies for 1973, Live and Let Die. Why? Kashmir shares a similar chromatic motif to the James Bond theme that is quite noticeable if you play them back to back. There's also the movie's theme song by Paul McCartney in Wings. Kashmir's descending chord progression on the first part has some influence of Live and Let Die's orchestral hits. Now there are other songs I deem relevant in Kashmir production choices. Check them out. Another small source of inspiration can be traced back to the 1973 versions of Dazed and Confused, where Jimmy would play around a dominant key of D with subsequent variations. Jimmy revisited Black Mountain's Side and White Summer's D-A-D-G-A-D guitar tuning for Kashmir, which is a 3/4 polyrhythm, with the drums following a 4/4 time signature. The song was mostly worked between Page and Bonham in 1973, with all other elements, orchestra included, added in 1974. The middle section for the song is a somewhat A major blues call and response situation that later moves into a G minor to A major plus A augmented portion. This last bit is reminiscent of Spanish flamenco progressions, as well as Arabian works and scales in the final ascending part. Kashmir was a great example of world music. Robert Plant really outdid himself in the lyrics department with a personal recollection of his travels in Morocco. Now, he was intimidated at first by the music, but later found inspiration in singing against the beat in an almost progressive rock way, like Yes. Geographically speaking, Kashmir is very far away from Morocco, sitting in the middle of India and Pakistan, as well as China and India. A location with a long history of extreme violence by all parties involved, trying to claim its rights. Led Zeppelin's timing for writing this song was interesting, as a peace agreement for the Kashmir conflict was signed on July 2, 1972, putting a temporary solution on a never-ending war that was resumed in the 90s to this day. Although he wasn't credited as a songwriter, Untold Jones played a key role besides his bass parts in arranging the monumental 3D score for Kashmir, which was recorded with actual strings, a brass section, and Untold Jones on mellotron, all mixed together. The orchestra was performed by session musicians. The question remains if they knew who the session was for. Because they are not credited, most likely they didn't. Kashmir was played on every Led Zeppelin show from 1975 until 1980, featuring a John Bonham showcase of drum fills in the last part of the song. It was also performed at both reunion shows in 1988 and 2007. You can check my post-Led Zeppelin 1990 series for both a deep dive on Page and Plant working out their Egyptian arrangement for Kashmir and the controversial Puff Daddy version for Godzilla. Looking to make use of precious studio time with Led Zeppelin's schedule on hold, Peter Grant sent Bad Company to Headley Grange for them to record their debut in November 1973. Signed to Led Zeppelin's still untitled label, they were discovered by Zeppelin's roadie leader, Clive Colson, who made the connection with Peter Grant. Former Free bandmates Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke, ex-Mott the Hoople's Mick Ralphs on guitar, and ex-King Crimson Buzz Burrell on bass, recorded 8 tracks with sound engineer Ron Nevison. In other news, Robert Plant got nodule surgery on his vocal cords, which brings the question on how the new Physical Graffiti numbers sounded back in October when he still had this voice. This medical procedure was kept away from the press at the time. Robert couldn't speak for 3 weeks, and his vocal sound changed forever. By the time Led Zeppelin reconvened in early 1974, Robert Plant sounded hoarse and raspy. His whole voice was gone. One of Jimmy's finest guitar achievements. The main rhythm tracks were recorded in November. Jones's bass overdubs and Robert's vocals were added in 1974. Following the lessons of Houses of the Holy, Jimmy Page worked out this song in advance at his home studio in order to come up with the arrangements and layers needed to convey an emotion of nostalgia, regression, and acceptance. With Robert's lyrics about a past girlfriend who had him choose between their relationship and rock and roll, circa 1964, it is one of Zeppelin's last songs to feed from an acoustic source. The composition features a drop D guitar tuning with open chord movement in A major. Bonham's drumming goes for a Kashmir-inspired tempo throughout the piece, and similar fills to another graffiti number in The Light. The way John Bonham comes in with the main groove on the 2.5 pulse of the 4x4 bar is classic Bonzo. Jimmy's guitar solo is backed up by D major 7th, G, and E minor, which elevates his elegant phrasing. The hard rock section has a powerful crunch and resolution with a big open D chord, hence the drop D tuning coming in handy. Several major 7th chords create a sort of instrumental bridge back to the main motif, where Page added his army of guitars, emulating a brass section. 10 Years Gone was premiered on Led Zeppelin's 1977 tour, with Untold Jones using a triple neck guitar. It was always lacking the extra layer of tasty bass lines. that were just impossible to do on stage. 10 Years Gone made 2 final appearances with John Bonham in 1979 at Copenhagen and Epworth. The song was played once on Page and Plant's 1996 show in Osaka. It was later revisited by Jimmy Page on his brief partnership with the Black Crowes, captured on the Live at the Greek album. 1973 ended with Dennis Coffey of Scorpio fame and his 1971 version of, quote, Whole Lot of Love coming back to the charts. Okay guys, the story stops here, but please stay tuned for episode 2 as we go into 1974. Bye bye.